Good morning. One of the things that I've grown to enjoy about preaching a little bit differently in Lent from a different lectionary, a different set of readings, is that it's given us a larger slice than what we're sometimes used to. Instead of the 6, 7, maybe 10 verses that we often have, and this week it was 30 verses spanning 2 chapters. I broke it up a little bit because it might be a little bit easier to hear in multiple parts from Emily and then from myself. But by hearing more of the story all the way through, it gives us a greater sense of context and what's going on within it. So you heard the Zacchaeus story from Emily. This will actually be the before that and a couple of episodes there. This is Luke 18, verses 31 through 42. Jesus took the 12 aside and said, "Look, we are going out to Jerusalem, and everything written about the Son of Man, the human one, by the prophets will be accomplished. He will be handed over to the Gentiles. He will be ridiculed, mistreated, spit upon. After tormenting him, they will kill him. On the 3rd day, he will rise up." But the 12 understood none of these words. The meaning of this message was hidden from them, and they didn't grasp what he was saying. As Jesus came to Jericho, a certain blind man was sitting beside the road begging. When the man heard the crowd passing by, he asked what was happening. They told him, Jesus the Nazarene is passing by." The blind man shouted, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Those leading the procession scolded him, telling him to be quiet, but he shouted even louder, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stopped and called for the man to be brought to him. When he was present, Jesus asked him, "What do you want me to do for you?" He said, "Lord, I want to see." Jesus said to him, "Receive your sight. Your faith has healed you." And once he was able to see, he began to follow Jesus, praising God. When all the people saw it, they praised God too. There's a large category of items that are lost to history and out of mind. Useful everyday things that are good, solid, steady sellers, and that we all know well, even if it takes a little bit of explaining now. I give you, by way of example, whiteout. I'm guessing that were you to actually open up your drawer and dig all the way to the back, you would probably find a bottle or 2 dried up in the back there. And for those who don't know and don't know about these things, there used to be these things called typewriters, where you had to learn the physical and mental ability of not just hitting a key and getting a letter, but hitting a key just right in just the right time so they didn't run into each other. And then when you did make a mistake, you had to crank it out, get out your bottle, paint over the mistake, get it back lined up, and start again. It was great fun. Imagine the wonder and awe when you had something like an erasable typewriter. It's quite the thing. But now we get to talk about all this as they are museum pieces, at least by and large. What once was on every desk, everywhere, now is just something that, oh yeah, there used to be this thing. This is far from an isolated phenomena. And I'm sure we would all have a list of the things that we would qualify as being in this category as they slide into history, quietly or not. Blinders are one of these sins. We know what they are, at least by principle. There isn't a whole lot to the of nuance to the name after all. If you're called blinders, they might just blind you. But my familiarity is a little bit more personal, given that I've known my fair share of folks for whom a horse is a daily driver and not an expensive hobby. And there's actually a lot of utility in a blinder, as it turns out. Because we forget that this is how a horse sees. They have almost 350 degrees of peripheral vision. And they can only really not see below their nose or behind them. That's it. Everything else they see. But it's only this that gives them stereoscopic, accurate sight. So the blinders, it turns out, are serving a fairly specific purpose to reduce that far grander scale of, I have to see everything, down to what is it that I need to see, especially as I make my way down the road with traffic more or less or not being patiently going around me. As often as we're giving the thing that blinders are simply a relic of history, we're moving on the path without relevance, say being a good cliche to illustrate a point as something to be removed. They do serve a purpose, and they are there and so far bigger than what we might think. Not only are these still a thing, but a very important thing, it turns out. It's blinders that links these various stories together. Each of these stories speak to the way of seeing and knowing, and they each have their own breadth and dimension. But each of these stories from Luke have their own unique short-sightedness and limitation, one on top of the other. Reading the Bible as we do, with one nugget and one story at a time. These connections are not often clear and can easily be seen as not like this. We might even struggle to place these stories in proximity to each other because, one, Luke is not where we go for storytelling prowess, save around Christmas time, but also, two, the stories stand alone with their own morals and connections to the world. And most of it does not have to do with sightedness or the lack thereof. But there is a connection all the same. The first being this. There is a blundering of vision with the disciples attempting to reconcile the message that they are hearing from Jesus and their notion of what to expect out of the Messiah. And the Messiah was intended always to die and to be raised within the power of God. And this, of course, rubbed them the wrong way in every way possible because it's just not the right story. The messianic promise that they understood Jesus to fulfill laid at the very center of what it meant to be a nation of Israel, let alone a Jew. And the last thing the Messiah was meant to do was to die. The last thing the Messiah was meant to do was to even interact with Gentiles, come to that, let alone be subject to them. It's kind of like, say, if Santa Claus started wearing neon green instead of red and white and developed like turnips as a snack instead of milk and cookies. It would be a bit of a difference. And not at least what we were expecting. In the story of the blind man at the side of the road, you have the obvious, yes, and that's not to be ignored. But there's also a lot more going on here too. You have the focus of the disciples and the crowds shushing the man into silence rather than seeing need and the opportunity for mercy as Jesus did. As with the children who were deemed too unimportant and too noisy to be brought to the master, so too were the needs of the one were trying to be buried by the demands of the many. They're unwilling to see the presence of need as something that needed attention, and we're all too willing to continue with the world as they and we almost always see it. That there are some people well outside of our vision and appreciation at all. The third story is the one that Emily read, and takes out the story of Zacchaeus. He too was a member of the disposable, disregarded class in his own different way. He had picked his fate. He picked the wrong side. And there's always consequence for that. He wants to see Jesus and is seen and returned in ways that I guess that he could barely anticipate. Zacchaeus had accepted his lie and knew that he was already despised and rejected. And it seems that he was well accustomed to the role of being on the outside looking in. But even there, Jesus sees him and calls him to him, bringing new life and new reality to him. The assumptions about the world were challenged as he bumps into Jesus and is brought to change and salvation in a far more revolutionary way than he could ever have anticipated. Each one of these groups, each one of these individuals came to Jesus looking for something, a glimpse of that which they had longed to see. And that's what they got, to be sure. But they also got what changed their needs, as their needs collided with the one who sees them and knows them as they ought to be seen and known. And that makes all the difference. Being able to be seen, and having been seen, be changed by the seeing. These stories of blind spots, each one different. Each one has its own different source, but all have the same response. They yielded to the expectations that were time and again confounded by the actuality of who and what Jesus is. Jesus comes along and bumps into the various blind spots of the world and changes them in ways that couldn't be imagined. We all have our blind spots. We all carry our assumptions. So the most durable things about ourselves is the way that we carry the ideas that we hold about ourselves. The things that we believe of who we are, of what we are capable of and what we are not capable of our role in the world, of whether we are worthy of love, whether we're worthy of salvation. These internal blindnesses can be some of the most defining things of our lives, let alone all the external ones that we think others think about us. Whether they're true or not, it doesn't matter. They really do have an impact. And it can be startling to have Jesus enter even here and challenge how we have understood ourselves for long times in the world and call us to new life and new living. We do well to be aware of our blind spots, the places that we struggle to see in order to be part of what Jesus is doing this in our world. And of course, we're always invited to take and look at them, perhaps for the first time. But that's not the only way the blindness can confound us. Sometimes we find ourselves surrounded by way too much to take it in all at once. My brother has lived in Northeast Vermont for almost 20 years, surrounded by trees on every side. Trees and mountains, mountains and trees, that's why they call it the Green Mountain State. And he happened to come through here just briefly and overnight on our way out to the airport. As I was driving into the airport, the thing that he kept saying over and over and over again is, "I just feel so small." There was just too much to see, too much to know. And it's a change of perspective. Sometimes the perch that we hold gives us far greater vistas than we know what to do with. Sometimes the world is way too busy to know where to look or to see or to know or to do. It can be easy to be spooked by the scary things that we see in the periphery of our vision of what might be or how it could happen or where to be. Just as there is a problem when our sight is limited, there can also be a problem when our attentions become so distracted and diffuse that we don't know where we ought to look and where we ought to step and move. A sermon with the title of Blinders would likely have a fairly predictable conclusion, really. Find the places to which you're blind and that which Christ is coming to you, and remove the blinders that you may see. And yes, by all means, do that. Remove the blinders of sin that can confuse and mislead. Remove the blinders of supposition that you might be surprised, even within the predictability of our studying faith. Remove the blinders that you may see all of who you are and all that you are loved for. This is an absolutely good message. And it's one to take to heart. Look at your blind spots. And we do well to remember that not everything that we see within our mirrors are really as they appear. They distort, they lie, they mislead all the time. And remember that. But there's also something to be said to remember what blinders are actually used for. To fix focus. To remove the distractions that can spook and scare. To give a focus to the road ahead and the world as it needs to be, not just as it is. Blinders remove the breadth of concern and permits a focus on what actually matters. The way in which we are being led. The way in which we can go through. And yes, do not turn a blind eye to the suffering of the world. Never, ever do that. But also remember where your focus can be. So I want to offer this conclusion. Consider your blinders. Consider your focus. Where is it directed? How does it point you to that which is of the kingdom of this world? And where does it point you to the kingdom where we really belong? How do they interfere with your expectations of God and what God is doing in Christ Jesus? Consider perhaps that your blinders that you may have been looking for might have blocked your view of what's really going on. Or, at least for now, your blinders might be too wide and too comprehensive for the moment. It doesn't allow you to focus where and as you should. Perhaps this is a moment that we're better served by adjusting our blinders and knowing where we look than simply removing them and being amazed. We know that the one who is at the core of the matter will be always there in all matters. The Christ who doesn't promise ease or lack of challenge, but is even where we might be afraid. That's where we focus. That's where we move. That's the lens through which we see all things. How does this witness to the kingdom coming? And how can I do that even here? Our blinders need to allow us to focus on Christ. Not the Christ of our expectations, but the Christ who sees us for just who we are and loves us all the same. May we meet the Christ in new ways, even when it surprises us. Amen.